And then it was urgency and violence that led to a midnight escape. And it was very terrifying. I acted on an impulse that I heard in my head of just run. I had a window of opportunity that never presented in violence ever. He never, ever, ever left a fight or a problem like that. And he did that time. And I used that window to grab my kids and get in the car and go.
You are listening to Prey vs. Predator, the podcast. We are so happy for you to join us again with Tia Levings from Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets on Amazon Prime. We are so happy to have part 2 of this incredible story of this incredible woman, writer, activist, Instagram person, a lot of titles. Thank you again for part 2 of your story and some questions that PJ and I have. Again, for our listeners, we do not have our co-host with us, Jill. She could not be here with us, so you'll just have to put up with Amber, myself,
stuck with us,
and PJ. So we'll just continue with your story. PJ, do you have a question for Tia?
Tia, we left you in your story with you had escaped mentally and emotionally in many ways. You had escaped maybe prior to this point, but physically you escaped. You're in the car. You have 5 children in the car with you. Is that correct?
4. Mm-hmm.
You have 4 children you have 4 children in the car with you, and you're fleeing. But your whole world is this, are people basically who would be saying, go back. So where do you flee to?
First of all, thanks for having me back for part 2, because we have to pick up where we left off. And I know there's always a lot of questions. And this is a great one of where did I go? Because my mind immediately goes into the physical part of it and also the metaphorical part of it. I was in shock. I was not planning on leaving that night. I had been working with the priest, an Orthodox priest who had become a friend, and we had talked about me leaving the next day. There had been some warning signs that couldn't ignore that are in the book. And so I had kind of set the structure to leave at some point in the first week of November. And then it was urgency and violence that led to a midnight escape. And it was very terrifying. I acted on an impulse that I heard in my head of just run. I had a window of opportunity that never presented in violence ever. He never, ever, ever left a fight or a problem like that. And he did that time. And I used that window to grab my kids and get in the car and go. And all I could think of at the time was, you're going to the priest, which I did. We went to the priest's home and they took care of us that night, facilitated me getting on the road the next day with back to my family. And I had not told, nobody in my life knew the truth of my life. So on the phone, I'm telling my parents basically how I've been actually living. And they welcomed me with open arms. But my body was totally in shock. Like, I didn't understand the depth of shock for a long time. And it got worse before it got better. I mean, we were physically safer because we were removed, but we spent a year in hiding from violence. We have had 2 forensic investigations for custody. We've had lots of separation violence, and my youngest is over 18 now, so it's different. My ex-husband never had any custody, but it has been a slog, like legally and therapeutically a slog. And it was 2 years before I started my first trauma therapy. So I have a whole medical journey as those symptoms started to manifest. All that toxicity manifested in physical symptoms. During that time, I had to raise my teenagers. I got into another relationship and a marriage that just ended last year. Had aspects of high control to it. I call it a very benevolent high control situation, but nonetheless, I was predisposed and familiar with a high control dynamic, and so I fell for that. So it has been a very eventful 16 years. This week was the 16-year anniversary of my escape, and there's just been an entire lifetime in that time.
One thing that you said, I relate to, and you said no one knew. I know for myself, a lot of people, when I got out of the situation, it almost, a lot of people that I loved and loved me, it almost felt like they felt betrayed that I hadn't told them. And where I'm coming from is a place where I didn't know. I'm not sure I knew. I mean, I knew at some level, but because I didn't have a language, and because like you had mentioned in our earlier podcast, my language had always sort of been, what could I do better? What could I have done differently? How can I, listen more, hear more, love more, not aggravate? Then, so it was hard to explain to people why I hadn't shared. And so I'm curious for you, was there any of that for you where you, even though on one level, yes, you knew, was there any of that for you?
It was all that. I was an excellent PR rep for my family. Everyone thought we had, everyone thought we had a very happy, beautiful family that had everything figured out. What I didn't know was so many people saw red flags that I couldn't. They knew we were doing something weird, but they didn't know what it was, and they wouldn't have imagined. And so it became kind of a parade of confrontation after confrontation of, we just didn't know. We would have helped you if we'd known, but we just didn't know.
Right.
And it always circled back to, well, I didn't know. My first attorney gave me a book called The Battered Woman, and he said, you need to read this. I was like, I'm not abused, because my husband never punched my face. And that was the only definition of abuse that I had. So I had to spend years identifying every single abuse and calling it what it actually was. And then I had to spend more years unpacking, how did I fall for that? And what led me here, which is what got me ultimately into the religious grooming and the religious trauma, and understanding it's my comprehension of God and faith at the core of all of this that leads to this physical manifestation down the road where I make these choices. That's a huge excavation and multiple layers. And I didn't have language to share with other people what happened. Even to this day, there are people who are close to me, and Shiny Happy People was a revelation for them, because they don't know enough of my story to know that this was happening right under their nose. And also the greater question of educating people on the abuses and fundamentalism. This is all happening under their nose. This is all happening around us. The Duggars had a hit TV show, Sheltering Abuse, in plain sight.
Yeah.
Most people cannot do that math because there's nobody to point it out.
The other question that lends itself to that is, like, you're watching the Duggars as nice, normal, healthy people. And I think it's almost impossible for nice, normal, healthy people to imagine that there is literally this world of predatory behavior and predatory structures controlling these people who are kind, loving, using what's most beautiful about you as a weapon against you. And so nice, normal people, if you haven't bumped up against it, you haven't been exposed to it, you haven't lived through it. I think part of what held me in so long, and it sounds like this might be true for you as well, is conceptualizing that somebody was doing this on purpose to control me was just not in my wheelhouse.
Right. And they don't know what to look for. I didn't know what to look for.
Yeah.
That's why we all have to do this work, because the signs are subtle and they're often attractive. Like, babies are pretty. Obedient children are pretty.
Yeah.
Families that are raising functional kids that aren't addicts and they're not what we would call somebody who's struggling in school today, or our crime rate or incarcerated. We want good outcomes for our kids. Those are attractive. And so we're lured, in by this candy that we want. And the realities are so far hidden and suppressed that we can't be faulted for not. There's a sophisticated system keeping our awareness down. They're not, Jim Bob's not leading. Jim Bob's not saying, hey, follow me. I raised a child molester.
That was my question too, because you say in the documentary, like the audaciousness or the audacity
of Jim Bob Duggar.
Of Jim Bob Duggar. Yeah. And I remember that from the first time I watched, and then I rewatched it for our just talk now. And just that audacity to think, I have a child predator, like I have an abuser at home, and I'm going to send my daughters to go defend him and have cameras in the house, and that won't be picked up. And part of me wonders if it's stupidity too on some level, but
I don't give Jim Bob that pass. He's not stupid.
Okay.
Well, I think what it is ego.
Ego.
I mean, all of this is ego.
Blinded by ego.
What makes us look good.
And totally confident the system will support him. He knew that he'd be back.
Well, and he even ran for whatever he ran for during that time when his child is on trial. And that's why I say stupidity, because I'm like, well, why would you do that? Like, but I guess it's something that other leaders would probably do the same thing.
We had a president who was elected after saying he would grab women by their pussies. Like, the standards are changed. Behavior doesn't matter anymore.
And again, that's a great example, because it was this predatory. I think once you understand what predatory language is, you can hear it, because that was explained away in evangelical circles as he's a baby Christian. So, or he wasn't a Christian then. And so just kind of the way that they sell it.
Was James Dobson too, who said
it? Was it?
I think it was James Dobson who.
Oh yeah. They had to do backflips to support their candidate because this was what they wanted. It's power, and they'll make all the excuses in the world, but there's not accountability anymore. That's what makes them so hypocritical.
The way that they can, that the predatory language can use rhetoric to flip things, to make it acceptable. And I think that's where it doesn't occur to you as a healthy, normal person. It doesn't occur to you that that's what they're doing. It's just like, well, they are pretty sure that that's okay. And so I guess it's okay. Like, I'll trust them. They're leaders. They're good men. They're good, and good white leaders, middle-aged,
he's wealthy. I'm sure that one was used a lot. His money. It's a lie. He's not wealthy. He's heavily bankrupted, and he's corrupt. But people thought he was wealthy and a good businessman. So,
well, and the wealth is also defined as God's blessing. Which ironically, if you really look at the teachings of Jesus was not a wealthy man, but that seems to be pushed to the side. So it's all merged together. I'm wondering about like any pushback for you since the documentary has come out, what that looks like, if you've had it.
Very little. I think it has helped that I already had a pretty strong platform. I'm very vocal and transparent, and so much of my story is right there. People can find it, and it's been available for years. The survivor community has been nothing but receptive. Every once in a while, I have to block somebody who is proselytizing on my page, or they're arguing with the survivor's experience, and those are my lines. If they're really nasty, I think really nasty has only happened once or twice. For the most part, if I have to deal with anything, it's somebody arguing with a survivor's experience, and I never allow for a survivor to be put on the defense. Their story is their story, and that their journey is their own. And my spaces tend to be pretty safe. I'm not setting out to create safe spaces necessarily, but they are. Just really hard to contain that on social media.
Yeah.
So I don't purport to like claim that that's what it is. Pushback. So it's an interesting question, because my memoir has gone through one of the most extensive legal reviews a book can go through. And the burden of things that would qualify as pushback is you have the injured party has to, or the one accused has to prove that you did it, you lied about them, what happened wasn't true, and that you did it on purpose. You're slandering them on purpose to hurt them. Like you want to cause harm in their lives. And my book does not seek to harm the villains of the story. It tells the plain and honest truth of what happened, and that is already verifiable online and other places. All I'm doing is showing how it manifested in my life, and I'm entitled to my story. So there hasn't been, and I don't expect there to be any pushback, because they would have to prove that I'm lying, and they can't. So, no, I haven't had to deal with it very much.
The reason I asked that is, and I don't know when we're releasing these, but we were talking to Lindsay, who's also part of the documentary series, and she was saying that a lot of people that have pushed back have been, and I was curious if it was male or female, and a lot of pushback has been from the female. And you talked about having those fundamentalist mentors, and how many of, as it is interesting how we turn on ourselves or turn on women versus women, to keep others in line. So can you speak to that at all?
Yes. Most of my mentors have children who are adults now, who have all come to me and apologized on their parents' behalf.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Wow.
They're thankful. I represent, so I'm an unusual survivor in that I was victimized through this, but I also admit to my own complicity, and I'm a parent. And so I think survivors relate to me because they want to hear their parents say the things I'm saying. They want to hear their parents admit to complicity and apologize. They also want to understand their parent better and how they could have gotten into something that was harmful, because the majority of parents do love their kids and don't want to create harmful households. They're doing these things because they had a good intention, and then they were manipulated by the system themselves. So in my mentor's case, I mean, they're probably not happy about it, but their kids have all reached out. And I really don't care about negative pushback. Like, I'm not here to make everyone like me. I'm here to tell my story and reach the people I can reach. And I'm very cognizant of where the lines are from my wheelhouse. Like, I do a certain thing to a certain niche audience. I'm not going to be like the end all be all for political commentary or historian commentary, or I'm not a therapist. I can't help survivors with, therapeutic work. So because I'm frank about that and honest, and they know what they're getting with me, and they trust that I'm authentic with it, there just hasn't been any negativity. I can't say it won't happen because my platform's getting more visible with the book release and stuff, but has not been a problem. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Is there anything, as you get more and more in touch with the authentic voice, your authentic self, that has been so long repressed, so long shut down, so long held away from you? Is there anything in the last few years that has surprised you about your authentic voice, your authentic self?
Yeah, so much. For one thing, so self-worth, I had negative self-worth when I left. And it's been a real ongoing journey to have self-acceptance, self-compassion, to understand that I did the best I could with what I had at the time, and that I have consistently done better when I known better. And to like myself, and to go back and reparent myself, do a lot of inner child work and connect with who I truly was before they interfered with me. And liking her, and then seeing myself accepted that way. Like, people like me because of who I am when I show up authentically. And that's like this little miracle to a previous version of me that was so afraid. And I had to mask everything because there's no way they were going to like the real me if I let the real me out. So, yeah, I'm still working through that. I'm still writing about it. It's kind of the subject of my next book, because I had to rebuild a sense of self. I had no self-actualization, self-identity, or self-worth coming out of high control religion.
Well, they don't, I would say that in those kind of situations, those predatory systems, you're not supposed to,
right?
Have a sense of self or self-worth. Because I would say the same for myself. The more distance I have from a set pattern of beliefs, it is interesting how it's changed. I am curious, like in your story you talked about, and this hit me both times, is you were talking about when you first met your first husband, you weren't attracted to him and you didn't feel safe with him, but you had to bend your will towards him or something to that. And it struck me because I remember being in college, like university, and this man came up to me and he said, "You're on my wife list." And I ran. Like I was so, ironically, my roommate at the time got him as my dorm date when we did those, like, they had to set each other up and she picked him. And I was like, no, but it just hit me because I was like, my instincts kicked in and I just kind of ran from him. Can you speak to it and it all? Like what was going on for you that you didn't run?
I was desperate to be liked. I was desperate to be wanted. I didn't date in high school. I stuck out like an outlier in our group where everybody was blonde or brunette. Everybody was able to fit in better than I was. I've always been kind of like the weird girl. And desperate to fit in and mold. Like I'm a people pleaser, codependent of the highest order. So desperately wanted to be accepted and groomed to accept who said that they were the man for me. If I had been in your shoes and someone said, "You're on my wife list," I would have said, "Oh, okay, let me see how I can think about that and like retrofit you onto my idea." Like I wouldn't have not questioned how he said that because there was no space for that in my brain, no practice for that. And that is kind of what happened. I mean, he said, "I think you're the one for me. I think I'm God's best for you." And I didn't question it.
Yeah, because that does happen in these kind of, it doesn't matter what tradition you grow up in, fundamentalism, but how many stories, even the stuff I grew up with, it was like, God told me that you're going to be my wife or that we should date. And it's just so...
I had a dream.
Yeah. And it's how it's being used by these men, usually men, are not maybe predatory. Maybe they're just using a predatory system to their advantage because they see a hot girl.
They too are groomed to use those tools.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I love this phrase that you said, this little miracle, as you started getting in touch with yourself and finding your voice and that you found people loved you. You.
Yes.
And this thing you've been working so hard for, as you are on your journey now, because now you have found your voice. I'm sure you're still finding it every day, but you've found it. It's people are liking you. They are valuing you. How does that change your world? Like, what does your world look like right now?
One of the things that's true about this year that I really do marvel about this every day. And I shared this on a recent podcast. I think yesterday, the upcoming Wise Jezebels podcast, we talked about this because the people in my life right now, I don't have to show up perfectly for them. And so if I make a mistake or I have a panic attack or I do something that's against the way they would like it done, I'm waiting for them to get mad at me and they don't. They don't get mad at me. I'm sitting here braced for it. I'm braced to be disliked for something I did wrong. And they're just like, "No, why would we get upset with you for that? We weren't like that. Like why would you do that?" Like they're just as baffled as I am convinced. And it's just part of the practical process now of like realizing the world doesn't suck and I'm in a different world.
And that probably gives you a sense of joy too, like to be accepted that way and to be kind of safe, right? Safety is such an important thing. And when you grow up in these kind of high control, course of control environments, you're never safe, even from yourself.
But I think that's what draws prey. I think that's what draws prey to predators. I think mostly in my mind, predators are drawn to prey. It's not like we go out seeking predators, but that predatory system kind of promises you that we have a way for you to check enough boxes that you can be valuable.
Yeah. How I'm understanding it now is familiarity. I was familiar as prey. I was familiar with how to interact in the dynamic of a predator. And so I am conditioned to think that that's normal or chemistry or appropriate. And it's been health and distance from that to say, oh no, actually it, like, for example, love bombing has been a new lesson that I've learned recently. I'm only familiar with the narcissist's love bomb, which is hard and fast and sudden. But then it dissipates, like your arc goes down in a hill. When you are in a dynamic with somebody that isn't love bombing you, it's gradual and quiet and builds in comfort and actually goes on a gentle incline of closer behavior. That's revolutionary for me from the time I was a little child, because love bombing, like that's in Sunday school. I remember Jesus being presented as this, big bombing love force. It's going to overwhelm you. And healthy love dynamic does not overwhelm you. It's respectful and quiet and calm and friendly and doesn't tax your nervous system. And, this is all new to me.
And doesn't, go and take over your boundaries. It doesn't push your boundaries. It lets you welcomes you in, which is hard because culturally we're kind of programmed to watch these movies where somebody is like aggressively going after the person they want to be with.
I love that you said that. Yeah. There's no boundaries in high control religion. And boundaries exist outside. So, and everything culturally reinforces this, fall in love and no consent anywhere. Like it's actually a romantic gesture if you're overpowered. Ew.
Pamela Anderson talked about how when she met Tommy Lee for the first time, she had said to him, I'm going to be going away. Don't follow me. Don't pursue me. I want to be by myself. Well, she shows up at Cabo or something, like she was on vacation, and guess who shows up? He shows up, exactly violating her boundaries. But that was not a red flag to her. That was a sign of dedication, devotion, desire, interest. So that's so interesting. Like, I think when you've got this sort of a humble spirit where you're fighting to have value, which is really like comes from a place of humility, I think. And you want to be valuable. You love people and you just want to be loved. Like, love bombing seems perfect because there's no vulnerability in it.
That's such an interesting example too. In that when you said that, the first thing that came to mind was the time I've been complicit in doing that myself.
Right.
And I think there is this point where prey becomes the predator themselves, and they take on some of those dynamics that they've been trained to do, or that are familiar or seem useful to them. And it just reminded me of the times where reactivity can also be abusive, following someone around and violating their boundaries. If you've only had your boundaries violated and you think that that's normal, then you may not respect anyone else's boundaries either.
Totally.
It's more to unpack and heal from.
Well, it's speaking to what you're saying about even the boys being groomed in these cultures, like I see even the Duggar in the documentary, you see this line of boys. And I think how many of them really want to be like their dad? How many of them are actually gentle of spirit and
yes,
want a relationship of balance, or maybe don't even want to get married, or maybe are gay. Like sometimes I have those thoughts and I think they can't be themselves as well, or they have to be something that they're not because they're taught, that a man is this, or this is what it looks like.
The toxicity is passed down in the Duggar situation because the number of children is so many. Like statistically, one of them is gay, and statistically, they don't all want to be Jim Bob. But also, somebody made Josh. Like Josh was created; he wasn't born a monster, and those children that are still in that household are still being parented by the same people who created Josh Duggar. And so, I believe they're all still vulnerable to whatever we don't know. There's still more we don't know.
No, we don't.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's because ego is not going to let this fall. That's what I would imagine, unless somebody breaks that, unless, the sweet and submissive wife decides to challenge that. But the likelihood at this point is probably small, I would imagine.
I also don't believe Michelle's so sweet. So
interesting. Interesting.
Well, you mentioned the voice because that we did talk about this a bit, and I'm fascinated by the voice. It's always been something I'm maybe from my background, but you said something like she knows how to raise her voice. She was a cheerleader, for heaven's sakes, to that effect. And I'm just like, like, I guess it is put on. But she must let it slip. Like I would let it slip and raise her voice. But maybe she doesn't. Maybe it's maybe she's changed her voice, or you had to, did you have a different
off camera? The camera people have heard her slip.
Oh, really?
Slip in code switch into that. The vocal training in fundamentalism is a real thing. And people are starting to catch on to it now. I've gotten a bunch of DMs about Kelly Johnson because she also uses that high-pitched cult voice. And they're like, I heard it. I know what she is now. And I'm like, I'm so proud of people for learning and picking up on the signals that are under the surface. They're hidden. It sounds sweet, but the gentle narcissist can be just as bad.
This interesting, this voice thing, because I didn't watch. The only thing I ever knew about Duggars was Amber complaining to me all I heard is that she would call and like rant I'm like,
but I was still watching it because I was fascinated.
Would rant about
awful.
the car accident you can't look away.
Yeah. So that really, that's all I knew about the Duggars.
Hate watching.
But when I heard this controversy about the voice, I thought it was fascinating because in my practice, one of the things that I'm trained in is something called disorganized attachment. So disorganized attachment are behaviors that disorient children. So one of the things that we're trained is that there are qualities of voices that set children's systems off. They set their attachment system, their nervous system. So some of the voices, like for example, whispering. Or using a childlike voice. So when you talk like this, you actually raise the cortisol levels of your children. So that sweet, soft voice that they're using is actually disorganizing and sets the children's attachment system off, raises their cortisol levels. So they would be under a constant level of low-grade stress just with the voice of the mom. Another thing that you look for is this disconnect, because the other thing I heard is that she would, and I'm not sure, Tia, if you said this or somebody was saying that she would say, do you need encouragement?
Well, yeah, they would use encouragement
as punishment. And so that becomes where there's a kind tone, but an aggressive message, which is also raises child's cortisol levels. So it's interesting, like these voices that people react to, they might not have the words for it, but it's actually profoundly dangerous to the child because too much cortisol will actually eat away at areas of the brain in children. And so it's incredibly damaging. So she's doing this all the time, every day with all the kids. And healthy, normal people are reacting to this voice, but not really sure exactly why. But anyways, so there's tons of research.
I think it's the horror of it, true horror. You have to, like, the disconnect and the dissonance that happens when something menacing is being said to you in what is intended to be kind and comforting. And at the same time, you're encouraged to sound the same way. It's maniacal. It's part of the mind fuck that has to be detangled afterward. I've worked really hard to speak in a normal tone of voice and not use that because it's cultural too. We have obviously cultural influence where women will speak like a baby in order to sound sexual or sweet and get what they want. There's all these studies that will show how women like change their voice to another register, and it's a really subtle form of manipulation. But in Michelle Duggar's case, she was on TV doing that. And so people do like viscerally react to, I can't stand her voice. I can't stand her voice. And that's been powerful to put language to, well, here's why, because you can see and and your body knows something's wrong there. regardless of what she's trying to manipulate you with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fascinating to me how predators find these ways of like, how do you raise your child's cortisol while looking lovely?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right? I wish we put it that way.
Yeah.
You too can create a traumatized child by speaking softly to them.
A well-behaved traumatized child, that doesn't.
Because that's part of how you control. Like if you read Steve Hassan's work on cults, part of how they control you, besides the isolation, is to keep your cortisol levels high continuously. He doesn't say it that way, but essentially keep you tired, keep you working, keep you focused, keep you beating yourself up.
So I have my more popular posts points to Gilead, where in The Handmaid's Tale, one of the characters says it was never about the bread. The bread was just to keep you busy, basically. You're just busy taking care of kids. You're busy taking care of the house. You're living this simple back to the land kind of lifestyle. It keeps you occupied from thinking too hard. Of course, thinking too hard is also shamed because we don't want you stepping into male territory or questioning your authorities. And so you're just always busy. As somebody who's always had a lot of cortisol in my system, that's when they say the body keeps the score and it manifests in physical symptoms, that's what they're talking about. You have all of that stress in your system constantly. Eventually it does more than eat away at your brain. It eats away at all your systems. Like your nervous system's never regulated. You never recognize what safety feels like. And then safety starts to feel dangerous. Like, what's going to go wrong now? And you have to make peace with the peace. There's a whole segment of recovery that's just making peace with a peaceful environment and not feeling more anxious because there's no high control happening.
Or even getting comfortable with pleasure. And I don't mean that in like a sexual way. It can be sexual too, but just that idea of, because there's this thing called organic intelligence, and it's all about just stopping and what feels good to you or feels okay in the moment. If you're feeling yourself heightened. And I just think that that's so interesting because there's very little focus on that in these cultures, or even that almost is bad, right? Because it's about
is bad. You're not supposed to feel good. If you're not suffering, you're not holy.
Yeah, well, that victim, right? Being the biggest victim is almost a badge of honor. Like we're being persecuted, like the president of the United States. I'm the most persecuted human. And it's like, no, that's not true.
That's where the martyr complex comes in for me.
Yeah, and I just think it's just so interesting just to tap into that self of like, what feels good to me was never really allowed. And can I do that now? Like, even it could just be the fabric on my shirt, that's what feels good. Or I see a picture that I like, or I see a face I like. That's enough. And allowing that to be true.
Right. It goes back to what you were saying about connection to self. In that moment, when you're identifying what feels good to you, you're connecting to yourself.
And that is so dangerous to the predatory mindset, because once you start doing that, you start maybe falling in love with who you are a little bit, or imagining, or dreaming, or hoping, all of which,
awake.
yes,
because dissociation keeps you so safe, and it's a survival technique for a reason. And most. I mean, I don't know if I can say most. I talk to a lot of survivors that have a skillful ability to use dissociation as a tool, like as a deliberate tool. But when you're present in your life and you're connecting to pleasure, or you're connecting to, I'll call it not pain, something that's not pain.
Yeah.
Your critical thinking is also going to come on tap, and your mindfulness, your awareness, and your language. And as soon as you say what's really happening to you in plain language, there's no more deniability. The first time a therapist said, I described to her what happened to me, and she said, that's rape. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, I was married. No, it's not. Like, I tried so many ways to not have that label put on it. But she read the definition of what rape is. And I was like, oh, well, that happened. And so then I had to sit in the definition and sit with this level of awareness that I could never dissociate from again. I could never turn it off and not pay attention.
I'm amazed. I think that you speak that so well for what people go through, and just getting the language for what you've been through and being able to connect to it in a deep way.
It's scary. It's scary to call a thing by its proper name.
It is.
Yeah. Well, it makes it real.
You know, and even creating something from it, I think it is honoring to you, but it's also, it's scary. It's scary. It's scary to tell, you know, people, to share it, to go, this happened, and not do it in a way, because there is self, you know, like, look at poor me. Like, you know, we can always tell our stories in a very, but actually tell it in a very factual thing to help and honor your journey or help others. You don't want to
further exploit yourself. You've already been exploited for someone else's purposes. You don't want to tell your story in a way that doesn't respect who you are and the safety that you've attained. And it's not out there for sensationalism. This is a fact that happened to me, and I will share it because it helps somebody. And there is nothing that anybody can say to me in return that could match what it was like to go through it. I've already lived through the worst of it because I went through it. That was the bad. That was the worst.
Yeah.
Out here, it's not that bad. And I will tell it with dignity and honesty because that's what I deserve. The story itself is not, I'm so much more than my story.
Brilliant. And we're so happy that you're telling the story and that you are continuing to tell the story.
When is it released, your story?
Yeah, tell us about your book and where you're at now.
The book comes out August 6th, 2024.
Okay.
It's available for pre-order now, and the Audible pre-orders just opened. I know a lot of people are excited for it to come out in Audible, and they keep asking if I'm reading it. That is the plan. I have to audition to read my own book. That's a publishing thing, but yes.
That is okay. That's pretty funny.
Okay.
I'm sorry for laughing, but
they want to make sure that the person reading can actually read, read well.
Yeah. And can you speak to your podcast as well? Because we both discovered your podcast, so Wise Jezebels.
The Wise Jezebels, my bestie, Dr. Laura Anderson, she just wrote When Religion Hurts You, which is the first specifically religious trauma informed resource for survivors. I'm so excited about it, but I get to be your best friend. And so we talk all the time. And there were so many times when we were having conversations where we were like, we really should make this a podcast. And neither one of us really wanted a new project, but we found a way to do it that's kind of like just an extension of who we are in our routine. And because we were both really passionate about reclamation, we know what it's like to be called a Jezebel because you're a truth sayer in a religious environment. You're automatically shamed. And Jezebel, her story has been so manipulated and taken out of context and misapplied. So we're out to kind of reclaim that. So what it is we inspect the fruit of pop culture, topics that we're going through, anything in our lives that might have a fundamentalist influence, and we examine it under that lens. So it's riotous fun, and we're very proud of our E for explicit rating.
I enjoy listening to it. I thought it was really great. And just even some of the topics like the OCD, I think you had an episode about that.
Which was new to me. I didn't
really interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you guys, you definitely have a lot of fun and crack us up. We are we're so thankful that you're here. We are gonna watch you and follow you, and I hope that everybody listening does the same.
Please give your handles again so people know where to find you.
Yeah, on all the social platforms, I'm at Tia Levings Writer, and my website is tialevings.com, where you can also pre-order the book at tialevings.com/book.
Brilliant.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Tia, for joining us again.
We're so honored to talk to you, and hopefully we can again, and we can meet Laura Anderson as well, because it sounds like we would have a lot of fun with the two of you.
Oh yeah, you should definitely have her on.
Yeah.
She'd be a great guest.
That'd be great.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Tia.
You're welcome. Bye.